that does. I don't know if that means the SoundGirls cloud server. So, hello, welcome everybody. My name is Juliet. I'm a member of SoundGirls, and I'm very happy to bring to you all Ms. Tana Douglas, also known as the very first female roadie, the very first sound girl. Yeah, representing here.
Yay!
And Tana actually has quite a breadth of experience in the industry, not only in sound, but also in lights, also in tour management and logistics. And we're going to cover all of that and let Tana share about her life and experience and also get as deep in the weeds as she wants to, because this is a technical group. And for all of our members who are part of the SoundGirls private face group, we get very technical because we're trying to help each other, and we do really care about the equipment, and that's why we're sound engineers or engineers in general. Our part of the show, our artistic part, being the technical side as well as the management side, many of us. So I hope everybody can go and read the profile on Tana that is already up on SoundGirls. We're sort of launching off from there, but we'll kind of land and get deep into it. So let's see, Tana, just to begin a little bit before the beginning, what kind of music did you listen to growing up?
Well, first, thanks for having me. And I've been looking forward to this. So I think this is a great project that SoundGirls is doing with a living history type thing. I think it's wonderful. And I think it's long overdue. So this is great. Music, yes, of course, it all started with music, didn't it? I think for any and all of us that ended up in this industry, we had a love for music to start with, and it developed from there. It just went, as opposed to the fan side, it went to the work side of the industry. And my choices in music have always been more alternative, a little bit darker. I'd like Eric Burdon and the Animals, Janis Joplin, those sort of bands. It was always the darker ones. The light, cheery, happy, poppy songs were not for me. Didn't suit my life, didn't suit my story, didn't suit me at all. I didn't come from a bright, cheery, happy place. So it reflected in the music that I listened to, but it's all good music, So that was my genre. My genre was the darker, the heavier sort of music.
That's great. That's awesome. So this is in Australia, right?
This is in Australia, yes. That's where I started. I started in Australia.
What part of
And,
Australia?
and well, originally I was born in Queensland, but with my mother, I did tons of traveling up and down the East Coast, pretty much nonstop until I was 11 years old. And then I settled in a private school, which was quite a contrast for me. Had been running feral for 11 years. Then all of a sudden I was in a girls' Church of England boarding school. That was a bit of a culture shock. But the one thing that saved us was Sundays. We had time to ourselves and we just play music. We'd play album after album after album. And luckily there was a few other girls in the school that were really into music as well. So we'd strive to find, what was the next new thing, what was coming out, who it was, what bands it was. And this was, very, late, very early 70s, I'd say. I think I started in that school in 1970 and I was there for 3 years through 73, start of 74. So that's where I got a lot of my musical upbringing from, was from these girls in this boarding school. And I was 2 years younger than all my classmates. So I had their influences older, they'd been around 2 years, which isn't a lot now, but it was a lot back then. When you're 11 years old and someone's 13, it's like, ooh, I'm going to listen to that. So that was I got to listen to stuff that the normal 10, 11-year-old wasn't listening to because I was hanging out with the older girls, and they obviously had been at this a lot longer. So, and luckily they had good taste.
And so everybody was pretty independent at the school?
Well, it's a boarding school. You tend to get independent at a boarding school. It's a survival thing, you know. It's no matter how it's cracked up that it's a girls, ladies finishing school or whatever. You have to survive. You know, you're there. There's, you know, no parents. There's, you know, whether they're nuns or whether they're church, you know, something to do with the church. It was a Church of England school, so there were rules. There were strict rules. So yes, you had to be independent, definitely.
Mm-hmm. I'm a survivor of a convent school for secondary, also high school level, but it wasn't boarding school. So I didn't go away until BA, my bachelor's. But I can relate to
Yeah,
the
exactly.
survival
I think
aspect.
they're the
And
same worldwide. The same.
yeah,
Very
yeah.
good.
And being kind of in a bubble, aren't you? Kind of at that point.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was probably the first bubble I got into. Exactly. Music was the second one.
Mhm.
And then this industry.
I'm sorry.
And then this industry was the third bubble I got
Uh,
into.
was there musical training there or before for you?
You know, it's funny. I think back, and the only thing I remember with that school was there was a veranda that had maybe like 6 little rooms that were just like big closets, and you'd open the door and look in and there was a piano in each room. But I never, for some reason, I never got offered any sort of music classes, or it never appealed to me. I think it was more one of those, you practice for hours, they rap you on the knuckles if you get it wrong, and it just didn't appeal to me at all. You know, we did a Gilbert and Sullivan play once a year, and I was one of the 3 little girls from school in the Mikado, and that was about as that was as adventurous as I got on the performing side. Once I'd done that, I knew it was absolutely not for me.
Yeah.
I'm much happier behind the scenes.
Um, how do you think those early influences, you got into it a little bit, but did you start getting interested in audio and engineering at that point and have any sort of an inkling?
No, I didn't know it existed. You know, I didn't know it existed until I was about 15, 16 years old. I just turned 16 and I went to my first club. I got invited to a club, which of course you're supposed to be 21 or over. But I get I get invited to this club in Sydney. I'd moved down to Sydney by that point. I'd already run away from home and been on the run for a while. So I was roaming around the
You escaped the
countryside
boarding school. Okay.
from boarding school, exactly. I'd been to a festival, and from that festival, I ended up down in Sydney, and which is quite a distance. I'd traveled quite a distance in my 15-year-old self. It's like about 1,400 miles. Off I went. But I got invited to this club, which was called the Whiskey A Go-Go, which is obviously based on the whiskey over here. They reproduced one over there. And there was some American R&B band playing at the time, and I'd never been to a club. I was still in my hippie phase. You know, you're lucky to get me with shoes on. You know? So I turn up to this club having been invited, and for some reason they put me next to the sound desk. You know, the guy who was in charge, the tour manager, who became a really lifelong friend of mine and a mentor. He put me by the sound desk and said, just stay here. He said, and we'll come and get you between sets, you know. So I'm like, oh, okay. So I'm standing there and I look down to my left and I see this, you know, this console and these 2 guys there. And I'm like, what is all this stuff? And then I'm looking at the stage and I'm seeing all these people coming on and off the stage, handing off equipment or fixing a mic stand or whatever. And I'm like, who are these guys, you know? And so what happened was I actually, when this person, Swampy, Wayne Jarvis was the tour manager who got me into this, it was all his fault. When he came back during one of the breaks, I said to him, I said, who are all these guys that keep coming on and off stage and stuff? And these guys here? And he said, oh, they're roadies. You know, so that was the first time I'd heard the term and the first time I'd seen the equipment. And I was just fascinated. I was just so interested in it all. I mean, I couldn't for the love of you. People say, what was the name of the band? I have no idea. I really wasn't that interested in the band. I mean, it was some funky soul band, which isn't my thing anyway, but I was just fascinated with everything else that was going on around it. So that was the start of it for me.
All the stagecraft. it sounds like, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. It fascinated
That,
me. It's like, oh my God, what is all of this?
yeah. Um, so Philip Petit's tightrope walk, what was that? How did,
Philippe,
was that there before that
well,
show or?
Philippe, okay, let me do a quick summary here.
Okay.
Left boarding school, ran away from home, went to Nimbin Festival, which was kind of like Australia's answer to Woodstock. And because I'd seriously thought I was going to go to Woodstock at the age of 11, but obviously that didn't happen. So when I heard at the age of 15 that Nimbin was happening, it was like, I'm going. So off I went. And Philippe Petit was performing at this festival, and this was like a 10-day festival, I think it was, and they brought him over. It was run by, by university students who'd put this whole thing together, and they got a grant from the government to invite Philippe Petit over. And Philippe Petit was this impromptu performer of tightrope walking and balancing acts and juggling and all of this sort of thing. And he wore black and he had very pale white face and this shock of red hair. And he was incredibly talented and he didn't speak. So he was a bit like Marcel Marceau in my mind at being
Mhm.
that young. It was like, who is this guy? What is this? And then word got out from that festival that he was going down to Sydney, and what he was going to do is he was going to tightrope walk across the Sydney Harbour Bridge. It
From
was like,
the top, is it?
it was, well, sideways. There's these two major
Uh,
pillars on the entrance to the bridge, which it's probably a good 100-foot wide or 200-foot wide, something like that.
yeah.
I can't remember the
I've walked the distance, but so
yeah.
you're talking width-wise.
Widthwise at the entrance
Across.
to the bridge where the two
Gotcha.
large columns are, and he walked across the top. You couldn't do the length; it's way too long. You couldn't support cable that long.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
so
It's
it was a commando performance. No one knew it was going to happen, but that was his whole idea of coming to Australia. He just went to the Nimbin Festival because that paid for his air ticket to get out there. But his real thing, because he'd done like a commando walk across Notre Dame in Paris. He'd rigged a thing and walked across the roof of Notre Dame. He'd walked from, like, he'd rigged something across the Eiffel Tower. He'd walked across that. All of these bizarre things that he would sneak off and do, and so he's quite the amazing character. And the thing that he did after Australia was the Twin Towers. He walked between the Twin Towers.
wow.
He's the tightrope walker who did that.
I'm gonna
And they
have to
made a
look that
movie about
up.
it. I think it was called The Wire.
Mhm.
And he's still alive. I think he lives somewhere in Canada at the moment. But obviously he's quite old at this point. But
Mhm.
anyway, I got offered to come down to Sydney with them, and that's how I ended up in Sydney. So that was really the first thing to do with production, even though I had no idea I was doing anything to do with production, because we had to get the balancing beams, the steel cables, all the guy wires. We had to work out how we could get the film, and we'd take the film, we're going to throw it off the side of the bridge. I was in the car down at the bottom waiting. We take it so the police didn't confiscate it. It was this huge spy versus spy type thing. It was quite exciting, really.
It was almost like a flash mob,
Well,
kind of.
exactly.
Yeah,
There was one, exactly. And
exciting.
that's what it was. I mean, people were starting to cross the bridge, the traffic in the morning. And some people are just like, what's all everyone stop for? And they're angry because they're late for work. And others are just getting out of their car and looking up, going, my God, look at that. So it was quite amazing to watch and to be, I was a very small part of it, but it was just something to be so involved in. It's like you get a rush from it. And it was like, this is exciting. I like this. So then when the music side of it came along, it was like, it was a similar feeling. It was like, this is exciting. I like this. So
Mhm,
that's where I jumped to music. That's how it all
mhm.
started. Philippe Petit, whether knowing it or not, he was involved.
Mhm, mhm. So after the Philippe Petit gig, you met Swampy,
Correct.
and
Yeah.
then okay,
And
okay.
he's the one who placed me at the front of house sound desk. Said,
Ah,
you wait here and I'll come back and get you. And I'm watching these guys mixing the sound and watching other people go on stage. It was like, this is it. Whatever this is what I want to be a part of.
that's great. At the Whiskey A Go Go in
At the,
Sydney.
at the Whiskey Go Go in Sydney, Australia.
That's great. Um, did you have okay, so people will read that you quickly got into sound and quickly ended up running sound for AC/DC after starting in their backline, right?
That's
Um, So, did you have doubt in the beginning, or how did you deal with all of a sudden being thrust into the situation and now having to meet the expectations?
Well, I mean, I did start doing backline, like you mentioned, and so I was familiar with what the guys wanted. I knew what
Mhm.
sound they wanted from their backline equipment. I knew what they were looking for when we do shows supporting other bands, etc. So I think that the thing was, I mean, basically, they just sent me one day to go and pick up a PA. I had no idea that that meant I was going to be operating it. I thought I was just going to pick something up. So it's like, okay, off you go pick this up. Okay, and so while I was there, the couple of the guys said, well, this is what you're going to need. You're going to need this and this. And it was like a basic three-way system, and that's all it was, I mean, the desk had 12 channels. That was it. And we did the monitors and the front of house sound from the same desk. which
Challenge.
which AC/DC is
Um,
not the ideal band to be doing monitors from the front of house, but it
yeah.
was very early days, and the equipment was in very early days. So at the time, it was like, ooh, you've got a flash PA. I mean, I only ended up doing it because they've gone, oh, by the way, Tana, we want you to do the sound now because you know what we want. So I guess I knew what they wanted without knowing that meant I was supposed to be able to do sound. So there
Yeah.
was never a lesson. There was no lessons involved ever. It was just, here you go, take this, and we're off to the show now. It's like,
Oh.
okay. And I was too embarrassed to fail. It was like, well, I can't let them down. I just have to do this. And that's,
Yeah.
that's been the story of how this industry started. People being thrown in the deep end and
Mhm,
just being told sink or swim. And
mhm.
and luckily a lot of us learned how to swim really quickly and really well. But
Yeah.
that's what it was. I mean, God forbid there were any classes or any time to take classes. That in
Yeah,
those days
that too.
you could do 12, 14 shows in a week. There was no time to, oh, well, I'm going to take the weekend or I'm going to take a week and go back to the factory and learn how to do this. Oh, no, that never happened. Only time you saw a factory was when you were picking up a piece of equipment or dropping off a broken piece of equipment. Never time for any learning. That was all
Yeah.
done in the show, during the show.
Wow, on the fly.
Absolutely on the fly, yes.
So when you picked it up, the first PA, well, you didn't know at that point that you were gonna run it, but did you, kind of ask a little bit about it and kinda know where the on button is? Kinda ask, "Where's the master?"
Well,
And
I
kinda
did. I mean, what we did, they didn't actually set up the PA that they gave me and show me how to operate it. That never happened. What they
mm,
did was I think they had some bits of equipment set up in like any production factory, warehouse. There's a bit of equipment set up here. There's something here that they're working on. And so I'm just sort of looking at everything because, I mean, I think curiosity has got me pretty much everywhere in my life. I'm just curious. That's what it is. That's how I am. And it's like, and I want to know if there's something there, I want to know how it works and why it works, which I think is just as important on how it works, as knowing why. But that luckily one of the people at the warehouse was familiar with Bon Scott, who was the original singer. He was actually a guitar player in an earlier band that Bon was in. So he did say, he said, you know what, you're going to need to do this with Bon's voice. You're going to need
mm.
this. So that was as near as I got to anything. He said, I mean, the advice was make sure Angus and Malcolm keep their guitars turned down.
Yeah.
I said, oh yeah, that's going to work.
We'll
So
try.
that was the advice I got. Make sure they keep the guitars turned down.
Yeah.
And this system should work for you. Should? Wait, what?
As you turn them down, they're turning up on the
Oh,
stage.
exactly. Just like this. Boom. Across the knobs on a Marshall stack. Zoom. You could get
Yeah.
them all up to 10. One swipe of the wrist. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Or
Exactly.
11.
Yeah.
Um,
Or 11, exactly.
let's see. So there was no room for doubt or overcoming doubt, was there? There was no, it's just jump in, better do it. Let's just learn it.
It was jump in and do it. And to be
Mhm.
honest, it got me off the stage. It was a
Okay.
little embarrassing in those days being a female on the stage, because everyone in the audience would be like, oh, it's a girl. What are you doing? Get
Right.
off there, girlie. You're going to hurt yourself. It's like, oh, seriously? You know, it was like, so the thing that I disliked the most was having to go onto the stage when in the middle of a show, like if I was changing guitars out or if something had fallen over and you had to pick it up, because people would start yelling and hollering because I was a
Heckling.
girl. And it was embarrassing, and it was like, so when they said front of house sound, it was embarrassment. Getting rid of the embarrassment overrode the fear of having to learn something new and figure it out. I was
Mhm.
happy it was as far away from the stage as I could get. So I thought, this is good. I
It
can
worked
do this.
out.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I will figure this one out. Yeah.
So there was no heckling from the band or crew. It was all from the audience.
Yeah. I mean, the
Wow.
band selected me. When I first met with them, we did some sort of interview of sorts. I mean, it was very casual, but they're very selective of who they let into their inner circle, even way back then. So, as with a lot of bands, it's just as important if they like you and trust you
Mhm.
as to how, not how well you do your job. That has to be done well, of course. But if they have someone who they know and like and trust, who does a good job, and someone who they don't know or don't like, then who's going to get the job? Of course, it's going to be the person that they like and the one that they trust and the one they feel comfortable with.
Yeah.
So that was always, they were always very supportive, very supportive. I'd get from like other bands, crews would rag a bit, like, oh, and it's just like, I was pretty wild back then though. I could give as much as I got. So I would give it back quite as much as I got.
That's
So,
great.
so there was that, yeah.
Yeah. Um, so was there a point, did you start feeling that there was like a ceiling for you that you knew you had to move on and your kind of experience was topping out there?
Yeah, with sound, what happened was there was, like I mentioned earlier, there was no one to teach me, because I was doing the front of house and the monitors from the front of house. And the rest of the crew would help me set up the PA, but there was no other crew, like sound people on the crew. There was just me.
Mm.
And I obviously really wasn't a sound person. So when AC/DC took time to break for their second album, I kind of thought it might be a good time to move on and go somewhere where I could find something that, where I could learn, so
Mhm.
that's when that decision came. It was a little sad because you get attached to them, you get attached to the bands that you work for directly.
Sure.
But it was time, and it was time for them too, because when they'd done their second album, they were going up a level. So they'd be going to like, larger venues. So it would be a much larger sound system. And I would have to know how to operate that, and I'd be in charge of a crew, and we'd separate. Obviously, finally, they get to separate the monitors from the front of house.
Mhm.
So would I do monitors? Would I stay doing front of house? How would I have time to learn anything? What do I do? So I skipped to, in the downtime, which was only a month. So the downtime, which meant I didn't have time to learn for them before we went back out on the road again. There was no time, so it was better to move, So in that time, I got offered a job doing lighting, which I thought, ooh, lighting, it's dirty, it's hard. Those things are metal and they're sharp and it's ugly. And because everything was still made out of steel in those days, it was like, oh my
Wow.
God. It's like, weighs a ton. I know, it was outrageous. And tons of cable, tons and tons of cable. It was like, ew, I don't know if this is a good idea or not. But I knew I could learn. So I thought, I'll take the job. And it was an honor to be offered the job, because it was working for the major promoter in Australia at the time.
Mm.
And it was the primo crew in Australia. I mean, there was 7 of us, and people would die for that job. I mean, they would literally do anything to be on that crew, because you got to work with all the international acts that came through. You got to learn the latest in the technology that was changing. you'd see, you know, the equipment that they bought out, how it was getting different and how things were changing, and you'd be the first to see all this in the country. So it was a really good spot to land. It was a good spot to land, and I was very, very lucky, and I was very grateful.
What company was that?
It was Paul Dainty, who's still a major promoter in Australia to this day. And at the time, he had a production company, which was ACT.
Mm-hmm.
And that was run by a man called Ron Blackmore, who was just fabulous. And he was so good to me, so good. So, you know, nothing was of effort. He's like, we will look after you. We will train you. We will teach you whatever you need to know. We're here, you know, and you can't ask for more than that.
Yeah.
Especially back then when, you know, when I was still the only girl out there, you know, so it was a huge thing. It was a huge thing. And I was very, very fortunate.
And it was exactly what you were looking for.
And it was exactly what I was looking for. And I believe to this day, the only reason why I got that job was because I'd always been so good to other bands that did shows with us. So the crews remembered that. And so when a couple of those crew guys got onto the ACT crew, and someone said, well, what about Tana? They went, you know what? She's always been so good to us. You know, she's always let us use the whole system. She's always made room on the stage for us, supporting. Yes, let's get her in. She's got a great attitude, you know, and that's what makes it so important. So important. Think of the other crews. Always work with the other crews. It's an important thing. It will pay you. It will pay you back in the long run. Really will.
Mm-hmm. So they reached out to you. Is that how you found the position?
Yeah, well, I mean, I put the word out that I was looking, and then, you know, a couple of the crew guys came into town on a tour, and we were all just hanging out, having drinks or whatever, you know, and I think I'd gone to the show, and they said, well, why don't you think about doing it, you know? And I was like, well, I don't know, you know, because I was offered other bands, like Australian bands, offered me to do their front of house sound.
Yeah, at that point.
But they're going like, yeah, you can do AC/DC, then you can do us just like AC/DC. And that to me was such a mistake. It was like, you know what, you're not AC/DC to start with. And I haven't learned anymore. So I can still only go to that level, you know. I mean, I could have taken the job and I could have got a decent salary, but I'd probably still be there doing local bands in pub gigs because that would be a niche that I got stuck in, you know, and I just didn't want to get stuck in any niche. I just wanted to discover anything I could about the industry.
Yeah.
Learning, you know, learning, always learning.
And at that point, you were at what age at that point?
16, 17, I think I was 17 by then. Yeah, just turned 17.
Definitely don't want to stay stagnant at 17. Yeah.
17 and working for bands like Carlos Santana and Neil Diamond and, you know, Status Quo, different English bands, you know, it was amazing. You know, I did 7 major international tours in as many months, I think it was, you know, it was just amazing. It was just complete chaos, but I learned so much in that time, you know, and then I got hired directly by Neil Diamond's crew. Actually, Patrick Stansfield, who's a really well-known tour manager over here, he's unfortunately passed now, but he became a lifelong friend as well from way back when I was 17 years old, you know, right through until his death. We were good friends, you know. So he took faith in me, and I got recommended by Carlos Santana's crew to the Neil Diamond tour that was coming through after them. And they picked me up directly to deal with this outdoor staging roof that was a nightmare. It was called the Mighty Mobius, and it looked like a big sombrero hat.
Oh, wow.
But so it was one of the first freestanding roofs for outdoor shows, you know. It was like
set up from the ground up. Yeah.
The ugly stepmother of all of them. It was hideous. It was really hideous. But I was learning, you know, and it was like, I think the only other people that used it were the Rolling Stones. They just finished a tour of the States, and Patrick Stansfield had done that tour. So he took the roof and brought it to Neil Diamond because he was doing all outdoor venues in Australia. And you know how that works. Equipment goes from one tour to another. As long as it's a different genre of music, the audience never knows it's the same equipment, you know. So that was a smart move on his part, and it was a smart move for me because I got to become part of an American crew at the age of 17
Mm-hmm.
and learn something that no one else knew how to do. You know, again, it was a whole learning curve. So yeah, once again, it was a good break. It was definitely a good break.
Yeah. So then you were with the Stones then, you followed Stan's.
No, that was Neil Diamond. It was the equipment came
Okay.
from the Rolling Stones tour. He brought it straight over to the Neil Diamond.
Ah, okay,
Right.
the other way around.
Yes, yes.
Neil said, "I'll take the sombrero. Thank you very much."
Yes. I'll take
Tana, you
the
take
one with the hat.
it. We have Tana here. She'll learn it.
That's right. Who's going to be silly enough to take on this beast? I know, Tana will. I'll get it.
That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Uh,
actually, I think 3 or 4 shows into the tour, I'd broken the Stones record for setting it up and tearing it down. So
that's great.
Patrick Stansfield was quite impressed. So to impress him was a good thing.
Patrick who?
Stansfield.
Oh, Stansfield. Okay, yes.
Yes.
Let's see. Do you feel your sound experience buoyed your entrance into the lighting field? You mentioned that having taken care of the other crews for opening bands definitely helped you be, get the welcome
Absolutely.
pocket in.
Yeah, and it taught me hard work. It taught
Mm,
me hard work, starting off at that level with that size band, with that much equipment and that little time. It teaches you a work ethic that you never get rid of. It
mm,
never goes away. So first in, last out,
mhm,
working nonstop all day, 12,
mhm.
14 shows a week, which people laugh. They go, you can't do that many shows a week. Well, unfortunately you can, because we did. But you know, you do a
Two
show,
shows a day. Is that,
you do a show in the afternoon,
yeah.
you do a pub show in the evening, and then you drive back into the city and do a club to close out at 2 o'clock in the morning. I
Wow,
mean,
an after show. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So it's not even as though, oh no, it was regular club hours,
Uh,
but but it, you know, it's not as though they were even close to each other, the venues. I mean, you'd get in that truck and you would go flat out to get to the next venue in time, and then you'd have to run all the equipment in through the audience that's already in there. You'd have
Set
to
up,
carry everything,
strike.
set it up in front of them, exactly, do a quick 1 2 1 2, and then boom,
Yeah,
band's on stage. So
yeah.
that's why there was never any time to learn anything. It was just flat out.
Go.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's intense.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So it
yeah.
teaches you a work ethic, and the work ethic in this industry, I feel, is as important as being prepared to learn the knowledge. You know, to learn the technical side of it. Because if you don't have the work ethic, you're not going to last on the technical side of it anyway. Because it's long hours, and you've got to pay your dues. You know,
Mhm.
some people come into this industry thinking straight away they're going to be operating a front of house sound desk. Well, unfortunately, I did, but I never planned it that way. But it's so rare that ever happens. You know, you've got to work from the ground up, like any industry. You know,
Mhm, mhm,
so you've got to have a strong work ethic to make it in this business, I feel.
mhm. You're part of a team.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Mhm.
And that's an important thing as well. I think that being a female in this industry, you know, I would always focus on how I fit in as part of a crew, not how I stood out as a woman. You know, that to me was way more important, how I fitted in and became part of that crew, and definitely not how I stood out because I was a woman.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah,
that's an important thing, I think.
yeah. And the other crew appreciated that, I'm sure. That
Yeah, and they know you've got, you know, they've got to know you've got their back, you know, no matter whether you're male, female, whatever you are, it doesn't matter. They've got to know, each of us need to know that the other has your back.
yeah,
It's so important.
yeah. Mm. Um, so lighting, going back to that, does that also involve set design? And
It can do, yeah.
yeah.
Um, yeah, I mean, originally when I started lighting, it was still very theatrical. Everything was draped in black, you know, and you really didn't see the light sources, you know, because that's how theatre is, you know.
Yeah.
But and then eventually, you know, we'd start building sets. You know, it started off with a drum riser. You know, there'd be a drum riser to get the drummer up so that the audience could see the drummer as well as the other members of the band. That was the logic of a drum riser. And then all of a sudden it was like, well, you know, let's get these different areas, you know, where like Angus, for example, you know, he'd climb up on top of the PA. you know, well, you know, and who else does that? Eddie Vedder, all sorts of people do that. They'll climb anything that's climbable, you know what I mean? But then people thought, well, if we build them a set that they can run around on, it'll be a lot safer. You know? So let's try and keep them under control a little bit, you know? So yeah, I mean, I personally didn't get that involved in set design itself. What I would do is I would get involved in lighting the set. You know, if there was instruments that had to be built into the set, what we'd put in, how it would work, how that would work as far as visuals and technical side of it. So I didn't design sets as part of my career, no.
So, but if somebody ran and jumped on a PA, you made sure people could see them on that PA.
Oh,
Is
as
that
for
right?
lighting, oh, absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely, yeah, yeah.
Otherwise,
Before moving lights, that was follow spot operators. They were worth their weight in gold. Good follow spot operators, you can't beat them. And it's funny because it's such a small job, but it's such an important job. And you know it, if you're a lighting designer and you go into a venue and the spot operators are bad, it can make your whole show look bad. You know?
yeah.
And everyone goes, oh, that person's just a follow spot operator. You know, that's quite an important job, really.
Yeah.
Really is. You see it, it stands out. Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah. Um, let's talk about the equipment a bit. In the profile, in the SoundGirls profile, you talked about the Very Light being so instrumental in changing the lighting industry. How is that?
Absolutely. Well, because originally all the fixtures were stationary, you know, and the first thing that came close to a moving light was actually a color scroller, which was something that you'd put
Yeah,
onto a fixed light, but the colors would change.
the
You could
gels. Yeah.
program it so one light would have 12 different colors coming out of one light. So that meant we didn't have to travel 12 lights. We could just travel one with the scroller. They were notoriously unreliable though. They were clunky things. They were heavy. They topple down the light and unfocus the light. And so, you know, there were a couple of attempts at moving lights, but Very Light was the one that actually stuck, you know, and that was designed through Shoko down in Texas. They're the ones who really did all the work for Very Lights. And it was just such an amazing thing because we went from basic like side genies with lights, so you'd have maybe 12 lights aside and maybe some floor lights, you know, in the really early days, to trusses that had, you know, like 600 lamps on them, you know, and or 1,000 lamps, you know, depending how big the tour was, you know, and the trusses would be moving trusses. You'd have operators up the trusses. But what Very Lights did was Very Lights saved truck space. They saved on the amount of instruments that you had to have. So it was an economical thing as well. I mean, they weren't cheap to hire, but, you know, the money you could save by having, say, 20 Very Lights as opposed to, you know, 300, you know, park hands.
Yeah.
You know, it's amazing the difference, you know. So, and plus they had built-in gobos, which are the breakup patterns and all that sort of thing, you know, and they could be audience lights or stage lights. So it was a huge evolving point of the industry. Yes, absolutely. And just as that was hitting, I mean, that really got into its steam about, I think 79, 80 was the first time Very Lights were used in a very small way. And then they started to take off from there. And it was bands like Genesis that actually put money into the project so that they could use these lights and have this look to their concerts and their shows. And it was right about 83, 84 when the park hands started to die. You know, it was being totally outdone by Very Lights. And it was right at that time where I was flown over, I was based in America at the time, and I was flown back to Paris to work for an artist called Johnny Halliday. And he's this huge megastar. Europe has these huge megastars that no one else has ever heard of. But what we did was we did a 6-month residency in a venue, which is the Zenith in Paris, which is still a venue that everybody goes to. But we did the actual opening show there. It was the first time, it was brand new building, opening show. and we had 3,500 park hands
Oh,
in one lighting rig. And I mean, we had that roof loaded to the maximum, to the point that we had to have people standing on the roof during the show, sweeping the snow off, because if there was a buildup of snow, we were scared the roof would collapse because of the weight, because
yeah,
there was so much weight being rigged off those points.
yeah,
It was at its maximum. So we had a full crew constantly sweeping the snow off the roof, because we
yeah,
couldn't have it settled, because we just didn't know if the roof would hold it, because we had so much. And so that was the biggest lighting rig that was ever put together. No one was smart enough to get it into the Guinness Book of Records, but they should have. Because right then, as the timing hit, that's when Verilights just totally took off. So no one ever needed a rig that big ever again, you know.
wow.
So that was a great project to be on, you know, and I was in charge of all the dimmers and the electrics on that, and the control for that. For the
Wow.
French designer, there were 3 designers, 3 operators for that show.
Mhm.
And yeah, and it was huge. And I had that entire patch in my head.
Wow.
It was in my head. And they kept saying, this was with Light and Sound Design, which is now PRG. And they kept saying, don't keep it in your head, Tana. You've got to write it down. You've got to write it down. And I said, I'm not going to write it down. You'll send someone else in for half the price and I'll have to go home. I'm not silly. I'm
Job
not writing it down.
security. Very smart, very
Job
smart.
security, exactly. Best make sure I don't get hit by a bus or you're all going to be in trouble.
Protection, personal protection.
Absolutely.
So you knew the weight limit too? 'Cause there was
Absolutely.
okay. So even back
Absolutely.
then they knew.
It was such a big system. I mean, that's not even counting the sound. The sound was flown as well. And it was we designed the system to the maximum capacity of the roof.
Wow.
You
Mhm.
know, the only thing that wasn't considered in that evaluation was snow, and it
Mm,
was winter.
mhm.
It was eventually winter because it was 7 months that we were there. So the
Oh,
seasons
yeah.
changed. So that's why we had to have people up there. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was a brand new venue, you know, brand new. We opened that venue.
It's an arena?
Yes.
Okay. So
Yes.
tens of thousands
Oh,
in.
yeah. Yeah. I think, I'm not sure the capacity there.
Mm,
I should have looked that up, really. Or was any, I
mm.
mean, it's a venue that everyone still uses to this day. You know,
Yeah. Yeah, I've
in
heard of
Paris,
it. Mhm.
yeah, it's one of the
Mhm.
main venues in Paris.
Yeah, yeah. That's amazing. So the Very Light was both reliable and flexible. So
It wasn't. It had its moments. I mean, every tour that had Very Lights had a thing called the Very Lights Hospital, because
little first aid table.
they were constantly being repaired. You know, so there
Mhm.
was always, you know, a couple of extra cases of Very Lights, and it was always under the stage, and no one was allowed in there because no one was allowed to see the inner workings of a Very Light. It was all very hush hush, and
Oh,
it's like, we could tell you, but then we're going to have to kill you.
very
It was,
protected
it
information.
was that serious as far as the patents went on it and all that sort of thing. Yeah.
Wow,
Yeah.
wow.
Because there was a lot of competition. There was a lot of people that wanted to know what made that light work. Yeah.
I could imagine. Yeah, to go from so many park hands to reduce that number.
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely.
Um, let's see. Ava Light dimmers you also mentioned in and
Yeah.
consoles that change the face of lighting. You mentioned that in the SoundGirls.
Ava, yeah. Yeah. That was a chap called Ian Wally. And again, I was lucky to be there for the start of that company. And what they did is they took it from dimmers that basically, you know, Rank Strand was the first dimmers, and they were like built onto a wall in a theatre, you know, and like going back to Australia, all they'd done is given us 2 of those in big wooden crates, and we toured them, and they were still these huge 10-foot tall and 6-foot wide and, you know, 2-foot deep. We used to call them the coffins, you know. But Avo came along, and there was a company called Alderham, which started doing a type of modular dimmers, but Avo just aced it. They would just pull out, slide in, slide out, just like audio racks. You know, you just slide it in, bolt it, and it would control, you know, and it was just such a brilliant thing. It brought the size again because there was so much equipment being used now, It was all about cost and overhead. So this brought the size down, the compact down, how much could be controlled by it, and the Avo desk as well, the lighting console from Avo, the QM500, beautiful piece of machinery.
Mm,
Just a beautiful thing to operate. It just really was. It was a pleasure. It was just,
mm.
Avo just changed again. They bought it, they just brought the level of the technology up one more time, one more time, one more time, you know, and they're still going strong today. I mean, so that's, you know, goes to show.
Yeah, that's great. So they're consistently ahead, being at the forefront, it sounds like.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Mhm.
And getting to be one of the first people to use that equipment was
Yeah.
just wonderful. Just wonderful. It was so
Mhm.
nice to leave all that other stuff behind.
Yeah, I'm thinking
Gone.
on the wall. Wow, that's
Yeah.
like wow. Yeah. Um, so that was what year around when the AVO started coming?
Avo came out, I would say, in probably 79.
Okay.
No, 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 no. What am I saying? I'm sorry. 76, 77,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
78. Probably started in about 77, and
Okay.
78, 79, it was up and running.
So you were with ACT at that point?
No, no, I was in London.
Okay.
No, I was long gone. I was in London and I was working for a company called Tasco,
Uh,
which
Test.
was a major sound and lighting company until not so long ago.
Mm,
They dissolved into, I think Clare Brothers bought them out in the end,
okay.
and they merged into Clare Brothers. And Paul Newman is still working for Clare, who was one of the top people at Tasco. The other partner, Terry Price, died, unfortunately. He
Mm,
had a road accident. And
mm,
so he died in the 80s, which was tragic.
mm,
But Paul's still around, and yeah, and I think he's VP at Clare Brothers now.
mm, mm,
So, but
mhm.
Tasco and Light and Sound were the two main production companies at the time, and coincidentally, both were from England. You know, so it was quite interesting. Yeah, as far as technology went, you know, they did a lot of groundbreaking technology, Light and Sound especially, which is now PRG. Yeah.
Okay. So you hopped from Australia briefly to the US and then to London
No,
because
I went from Australia to England, and
England.
I was in England for 8 years, and then I came over here.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Okay.
I went the other way around. Yeah.
Okay. So and you ended up in England because I mean the light companies were there, is that right?
Yeah. Well, I got offered a tour, which in the end got cancelled, the tour, but I got myself psyched up to leave Australia. So I thought, well, I'm going to leave anyway. So I just did. So on a wing and a prayer and a couple of $100 in my pocket, I arrived in England eventually. So and I knew people, you know. I mean, I'm not saying it was easy. It wasn't easy. It wasn't easy. I slept on park benches for a while. I did all sorts of things. It was tough. It was tough, and it gets cold there at night.
Yeah.
So, you know, I had to come up with a plan pretty quick, you know, and luckily enough I did, you know, and I got asked to build a lighting rig for a band, which is a UK band called Status Quo, which
Okay.
never really did anything over here, but they're huge in England and huge in all through Europe. Still to this day, they sell out, you know, large shows. And they decided they wanted to have their own sound system and their own lighting rig. So I got, you know, and done 2 tours with them already. So they asked me to help build it. And from that, I worked with them for 4 years. And then from there, I took their lighting rig to Tasco. And that's how I started with Tasco. And then eventually ran their lighting department for them.
Oh, I see. That's
Yeah.
fortunate once you got picked up, huh?
Yeah,
Since you
absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah, because that's rough living, it sounds like in the beginning.
It was really rough, actually, you know, and I'm sure I made it harder for myself than it needed to be, but I was just, you know, I think another trait of people in this industry who do the job that we do, we're kind of proud people, you know, and
Mm,
we're proud of the work we do and we're proud of how hard we
sure.
work, you know.
Yeah, for
And I
sure.
didn't want people to know I was homeless, and I didn't want them to think that I was freeloading and I just arrived in England and, you
Mm,
know, expected everything to be fabulous. No, I didn't think it'd be fabulous. I knew it'd be hard. You know, I just couldn't say to people, look, I don't have any money. I don't have a roof over my head. Give me a
mhm,
job, you know. But, you know,
mm,
eventually it happened. I mean, it wasn't that long. It was a few months. It just seemed
Yeah.
like a lot of time at the time.
Yeah, I could
But
imagine.
but I
Yeah,
got looked after, I got looked after by a lot of people who I'd worked with, which was a good
good.
sign because it meant that, they had faith in me and they
Yeah.
were prepared to help out, and it didn't last long. And then I was self-sufficient and up and running and it was a good thing, and that's why it's important, to help other people out. It's really important in this industry. Some people are like, if you don't have a job, oh, so and so doesn't have a job, let's go hang with someone else. That's
Mhm.
so wrong. That is so wrong.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
like, we're all in it together. It's just,
exactly. Should be
it's an
one
industry where
family.
yeah, it's an industry we work too hard to not support each other.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. I'm glad that you had people who reached out and helped you out and
absolutely. Yes, I could
eventually.
still be on a park bench in England then.
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
It's
how
yeah,
else
it,
do we land on our feet if we, don't
yeah.
have people, and we have looked after people as well, over
Absolutely,
time.
absolutely. I'm the first to do that. I think it's important. It's really important.
For sure, for
Yeah.
sure. Um, let's see, was going back to the equipment, was there audio equipment that was also industry changing?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, I remember when the first Midas desk came out, and everyone was just like, oh, hallelujah. Ooh. Different equipment. I mean, the thing with Tasco, the company I was working for, they were originally only a sound company. And they actually designed their own complete system, which was called the Harwell system. And that was designed by a guy called Harry Harwell. So hence it was called the Harwell system. But that was totally an innovative system. It was completely different to anything else that was out there at the time, and the technology was just amazing on it. I mean, the actual depths of the technology, because I wasn't doing sound anymore, but it
Mhm.
was a revolutionary system design. And again, racks were doing the same thing. Sound racks were totally, equalizers, effects racks, all of these things that were just coming into play that hadn't existed when I did sound. So it was just amazing to watch.
Mhm.
And and I always marveled at the sound that some people can get out of anything, basically.
Yeah.
I mean, it's great to have fabulous equipment. Obviously, that makes your life easier. But I think it's just as great to see a brilliant, talented sound engineer get a fabulous sound out of crap equipment.
Yeah.
That to me is amazing.
Yeah.
That's where the real talent is. You know,
Mhm. Mhm. The
and
skill.
and I
Yeah.
don't think you can't be taught that. That's a skill you can't be taught.
Mhm.
That's a
Mhm.
skill that you've either got it or you don't.
Yeah. Yeah. Both here and knowing how to push your equipment, what it can
Absolutely,
do. Yeah.
absolutely. Push it just to the brink, not over.
Yeah. Yeah. Great. Let's see. Okay, going back to generalities, did you have challenging situations where knowledge was not shared, and how did you work around or handle it? A lot of sound girls I see on the board, this happens to a lot of people who are entering the field, and even people who have been in it for a while. That they'll encounter crew people that maybe they're hopping in or new to a company, and they're not feeling as welcomed by a particular person or the team in general.
You know, that happens a lot, unfortunately. And you know what I've found over the years? I've found that people that aren't prepared to share knowledge are the people who either don't know, really don't know, and have just blagged it, or they're insecure, because there's no other reason. I mean, knowledge, how can you not share knowledge? If you don't share it, what is it? It's a secret. It's
Yeah,
like you've got you've got to, I mean, there's only one reason to learn something, and that's to pass it on, in my mind, in my
yeah,
mind. And I've always been insistent on teaching people and showing people and helping people. And I think that's because I was lucky enough, fortunate enough to have good people take the time to show me and teach me.
yeah.
And I think that's why I made such a good crew boss,
Mm,
because I wouldn't ask anyone to do anything that I wasn't prepared to do myself.
mhm.
And I was always prepared to show someone and teach them not just how to do something, but why we do something, because the two are just as important as each other. You
Mhm,
know, if
mhm.
you learn how to set up a PA, great, but learn why you're setting it up that way, because the next venue is going to be different and
Yeah,
you're going to have to set it up differently.
yeah.
So figure it out, and if you don't know, ask,
Mhm.
but if you ask, make sure you listen to the answer.
Ah,
Because if you
yeah.
keep asking the same question over and over, no one's got time for that. But
Mhm,
if you ask and you learn,
mhm.
then who's going to stop you? No one's going to stop you. They can't. How can that be a bad thing? So
That's
just
it.
make sure you listen when someone's telling you something. That's it.
Mhm.
Because the only time it gets to be a problem is when the same person's asking the same question over and over and over again. That's
Yeah.
a sign. But that's not just this industry. That's in anything. That's obviously they're not in the right place.
Yeah, they're not getting it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Mhm.
And you need to get it, and you need to get it quick. You,
Yeah,
you just
yeah.
don't have time. We don't
Mhm,
have time.
mhm, mhm. Yeah, that's
So yeah, it's important. I mean,
mhm,
you know, you've got to share it. It really is. People
mhm,
who won't share knowledge just usually don't know. They've
mhm.
learned it one way and that's what they know. And maybe they're lucky,
Yeah, it's their inexperience.
and
Yeah,
maybe they're lucky enough to have surrounded themselves with good people, so they're protected.
yeah. Mm,
If they can't answer the question, they can't pass on the knowledge, then chances are they don't know, or they're so insecure they shouldn't be there anyway.
yeah, yeah. Mhm, mhm. So you also became production manager at some point? You were talking about being a
Yeah,
producer.
I did stage management for Elton John.
Okay.
So I was his stage manager for a while. I was with him for 4 years, and I never did production management. I would have loved to have done production management, but
Mhm,
at the time, it was I think it was one field of the industry that the guys weren't prepared to give up. They
mm,
just weren't prepared to give it up, because I think because the entire crew has to listen to the production manager, and being a female back then in the industry, it was rare to have the entire crew on board with you. There was usually someone who was like, it's a girl, or I'm not going to listen to her, and it's like stupid stuff, you know what I mean?
mm,
But
yeah.
so for some reason, I never got to be a production manager, which is probably the only thing that I regret about my whole learning curve, is that I didn't get to do that one job, but I got to do so many other jobs that, hey, it's okay. So tour management I did for a little while, but you know, I, I don't like babysitting. I don't like babysitting, and that's not for me. I don't need to spend all day with the band making sure they're okay. And it's not that I don't want to look after them. Yes, I want to look after them, but I just prefer the technical side of it. That's just
Mhm,
what I prefer personally. You know,
mhm, mhm.
that's
Yeah.
for me.
You have your own shop and you're making it run and not necessarily just yeah, babysitting as you say to
Yeah,
your
it's it's
tour.
it's yeah, it's too much fluff in tour management. And tour managers listening to this are going to go, oh, no, it's not. It's hard work. Yes, it is hard work. And I'm not taking away from that. It's absolutely hard work, but it's just not the sort of work that I wanted to do, you know.
Yeah. So you
Yeah.
got into logistics instead, is that right?
Absolutely, yeah, yeah, which was, I guess, a natural evolution from having done everything else, because I knew all the equipment. I knew the backline equipment, I knew the sound equipment, I knew the lighting equipment, I knew all the rigging equipment. And so, dealing with customs and dealing with, chartering planes and getting stuff from A to B, and
Mhm.
time frames being tight. And it was exciting. I actually loved the job, loved the job. And that was my own company that I set up. So that
Mhm.
was my own company, and it was here in Los Angeles.
Okay.
And I loved doing it. It was a good thing.
So that was
Yeah.
something you could do from LA. You didn't have to travel to do
Didn't
that.
have to travel as much. I mean, you go out like at the beginning, like you'll go into, say, rehearsals, or pre-production, because you need to know what all the equipment is. Got to make sure all the equipment's marked up properly. I mean, now it's like it's standard that all flight cases are numbered and marked and stuff. Well, they weren't originally. So we started doing that, when stuff had to travel independently on its own, we had to know what was in each case.
Mhm.
So, it started off, you'd have tape on the lid of the case saying guitars or something, you know what I mean? But when it got to the point where you're dealing with customs and you're dealing with air freight carriers and you're dealing with handlers, they've got to know, and you've got documents that match the equipment. It's what's in case G1. Well, here's a complete breakdown of what's in that case. So the case had to be marked properly and you had to match what's in the equipment. And that was the carnet, you know, so when you're dealing with carnets and you're dealing with customs, everything's got to be accurate,
Yeah.
absolutely accurate, and done on time and done in an orderly fashion.
Mm.
So I like that side of it. And you still got to go out on tour. You just didn't stay for the whole tour. You go in the beginning, you go at the end. If you needed to, you go out somewhere in the middle just to say hi and make sure everything was okay and, you know, that everything was organized for the end, you know. But you'd be working with several bands at any given time, you know. So you're really working on 6, you know, 2, 4, 6 different tours at the same time, you know. So it made it interesting, you know. You keep those balls up in the air,
Yeah.
constantly juggling, you know.
So
But
the crew on tour is keeping it organized all the while. Is that the production manager then?
yeah, well, yeah. I mean, it's like a normal tour. Once you arrive in the country, you're doing your tour. You know, you really
Yeah.
shouldn't need anything from a logistics person
Mm.
unless something changes. If
Mhm.
something changes, then that's when you bring us in, and that's when we fix it. So really, what we do is we put out fires. You know, so you know, if something like, you know, a truck runs off the road or something, and the trucking company, you know, can't get to it, what do we do? You know,
It
well,
has
we'll come in.
happened.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. You
Oh,
know,
yeah.
or a flight gets cancelled, the equipment's booked on, and it's supposed to be leaving and going to a different country. How do
Yeah.
we fix that? We don't have time to wait for the next, you know, next week when there's a space available. So we charter something, you know.
Yeah.
So, or, you know, again, you know, Lenny Kravitz decides he wants to record down in you know, Jamaica somewhere. You know, it's like, what do we do? How do we get him there? You know, well, this is how we do it. We have to charter this plane because it's the only one that can take equipment of that size onto that island, you know.
Wow. Yeah.
So, you know, it's all logistics and it's knowing, but the important thing is knowing the equipment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That it sounds like such an important job. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. And it's an invisible job, really. You
Mhm.
know, like the most of the crew out there on the tour don't really even give it a second thought. You know,
Mm.
I mean, I know I never did, you know,
Mhm.
until
Mhm.
the only time I ever had to deal with it before I did it as a job was we were like we were loading a truck to go from England to Germany and to start a tour. And everyone decided they wanted to take a break and go to the pub at lunchtime, which is such a British thing. They always go to the pub at lunchtime. I never got that, but anyway. So everyone goes to the pub at lunchtime, and the guy in the yard in the warehouse moves the lighting desk around the corner because he's sweeping the floor while there's no one there, thinking it's a good idea.
Oh.
Everyone comes back from lunch. We load everything on the truck. The truck goes, and all of a sudden it's like,
Where's the lighting desk?
oh no, what are we going to do? And of course,
Oh,
there was no cell phones or anything. It's not as though we could call him and tell him to come back.
this was
So
1980s. Uh-huh.
yeah, so I actually took it down to the airport and checked it in as my baggage.
Oh.
It's huge. It's huge. It's like 6 foot long, 3 foot wide, 5 foot high.
You bust back.
She's gone. The
Oh.
lady, the lady at the terminal's like, "What's that?" And I said, "It's my toolbox." Like, toolbox? Yes, I have to get it to. Like you could check a toolbox these days anyway. So it's like, yes. So yeah. So anyway, we managed to pull it off. We managed to get it on that plane. Luckily, it fit.
Okay.
But yeah, that was my first introduction to logistics. It's like, oh my God, how are we going to do this?
Wow. Wow. So that, yeah, because you were on a crew at that point. You,
Yeah, I was on a crew,
uh-huh.
and you don't have to think about it because someone else is dealing with it. You've got enough to think about, you know.
Yeah. So you came back to LA and you had your son come back to you, right? That was a part of your wanting to have a settled spot.
That's right. Yes,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Okay. So how old was he when he came to
he
you?
was 8.
Okay. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yes. So we'd been in Australia for 4 years. I took 4 years in Australia and then came back here.
Ah, okay. How did you balance raising him with working in the industry?
Really tough, very, very difficult. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
that's why logistics came into it, because I couldn't tour anymore. I just couldn't tour. I mean, I'm so happy that women now can actually it's more accepted. I mean, it was absolutely not accepted then. Absolutely not. Didn't matter how long I've been working in the industry. There is no way I was going to get a tour with a child. Not
Mm,
that I'd take him with me, of course, but there's
mm,
just no way. I mean, it was men can do it, but women can't,
mm.
you know?
Double standard.
Absolutely. And that was one rule that was not going to bend. It was not going to bend. So I had to find a different career to stay in the industry. And that's why I took logistics.
I see. There's sort of this assumption of the level of responsibility, I guess, or the type of responsibility, as if a man wouldn't have it, but a woman would.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's okay for a man to go away and go on a tour and leave his family, but it's not okay for a woman to go on tour and leave her family.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah,
It was just absolutely unacceptable. And thank God that's changed now. You know,
yeah, yeah,
there's women out there, thankfully, that have been able to break through that barrier,
yeah.
whereas I on my own couldn't do that. I just couldn't. That was the one thing that I couldn't break through, you know?
This was in the mid 80s. Is that?
Yes. Yeah.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. Did he develop an interest in the field himself?
No, funniest thing,
He's
never.
like, I don't want any of it.
Wanted nothing to do with it. All his friends loved it. His friends thought it was fabulous and they all wanted to go to shows and stuff. And he'd go, oh, okay, then come on. But no, just didn't, not at all.
Yeah. So what is he doing now?
He's unfortunately died.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. Mm.
Yeah.
My younger brother passed also. A motorcycle accident for my younger brother. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, he's no
Mm.
longer with us, unfortunately.
Mm. What was his name?
Craig. Craig.
Craig. Okay. Craig. Mm. What is the difference between talking about your different lines of careers, um, but getting into logistics? So the difference between tour management, production management, and logistics.
What's the difference?
Uh-huh. Yeah,
Well,
some people might not quite, they might say, oh, well, doesn't a tour manager do that? And, set up the,
well,
you know.
well, I guess like how we briefly touched on it, production manager is dealing with the entire production and crew of a tour.
Mhm.
So they're dealing with like the equipment side of it and the technical side of it, whereas the tour manager has more responsibility with the band side of it and the business side of it, the accounting side even, and the management side of it. So he does a lot of the scheduling for like interviews and radio shows and extra stuff from the tour itself that they deal with, that the band's involved with, and logistics just gets it all there. Make sure that whatever's going on the tour, that it happens on time and on track, and that it gets to where it's meant to be on time, in good condition, good working order, and in time for them to use it when they want to. So
Mhm.
it's three completely different fields,
Mhm.
but
Make,
they all work in unison.
yeah, yeah. So when you were
Explain,
logistics, I'm
did
sorry?
that, did that explain it?
Yeah, well, how about a production manager then? Where does
Production
he fall
managers,
in?
that's what I'm saying. Production
Oh, I
managers
see.
look after the equipment side of it.
I
So
see.
a production manager arrives with the crew, travels with the crew, is in charge of all of the crews, different departments, irrelevant of what department they are, they all answer to the production manager.
Yes.
So the production manager in turn has to answer to the tour manager. And the
Uh-huh.
tour manager in turn has to answer to the management company and the band.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas logistics answers to everybody. Logistics, we have to make sure that the production equipment's taken care of on time, that the tour manager's happy with the way it's being handled, that the management company's happy enough to pay the goddamn bill.
You want to
Because
get
we
paid.
all need to get paid.
Yes. Very important.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because especially if they lose the equipment along the way, the Tana.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
that
yeah,
can get a little touchy. Yeah. I mean,
yeah.
stuff happens. Stuff happens. I mean, it's, for example, with ocean containers, people don't know that
Mhm.
ocean containers fall off boats all the time.
Oh my
All
gosh.
the time. They just fall off, whether they're full loaded with cars or televisions or bands equipment, it doesn't matter. So
Wow.
every time I would ship something by ocean, I would make sure it was in the belly of the vessel, because then
Mm.
it couldn't fall off.
Oh my gosh. Yeah,
It's
I
just
couldn't imagine.
things
Yeah,
like that. I mean, it's bizarre, it's the things that you come up against. And
yeah,
you can have equipment booked on a flight, but if you're not there to make sure it gets on that plane, you don't find out until the next day. It's too late. So you're there, you go down there and you make sure it's loaded on that plane, you make sure it's there, or you have at least someone there to do that, because you can't sit back, you can't go to bed and get up in the morning and hear a message saying, oh, by the way, your equipment didn't get on the plane, it got dumped. So it's a 24/7 business. It's
yeah.
logistics is definitely 24/7. Plus everyone's in a different part of the world anyway, so they're on different time zones.
Mhm,
So,
mhm,
you
mhm.
know,
Yeah, yeah, and you have to follow the equipment
oh
also.
yeah, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
I've always had a full office in my house,
Mhm,
always,
mhm.
because it's 24/7. If the phone rings at 4 o'clock in the morning, you best answer it, because there's only one reason why it's going to ring at 4 o'clock in the morning, and that
Yeah,
means someone somewhere else on the planet has a problem, and you
yeah,
need to fix it.
yeah, yeah. Mhm.
So you've got to be prepared to work like that.
Yeah, yeah. Um, so unique qualities to bring to the field, definitely negotiation skills, right? And organization skills.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Can you
Yes.
think of other types of unique skills and qualities that you brought that made you successful in each of your positions?
In each of the positions, I think learning and knowledge is just such an important thing. You've just got to
Mm,
be prepared to learn. I mean, people used to joke that I was like a sponge. I just like get as much information as I could get, and just
mhm.
retain that information. You've got to be part of a team. We touched on that earlier. You've
Yeah,
got to be part
yeah,
of a team. You've got to fit in. It's not about you. Once you become part of a crew, it's no longer about you. It's about the
mhm.
crew. You've all
Yeah,
got to work together, and you've all got to support each other. So you've got to have that. You've got to be prepared to you've got to let your ego go. I mean,
mhm.
not saying, I mean, there's crew people out there who have raging egos. But, you have to roll with that. Some of them, that's just how they are. But you can't have everyone out there with an ego, or nothing will ever get done. Nothing will ever get accomplished. But you've got to be hard work. You've got to be prepared to work hard, and stay until it's done. I mean, that's the saving grace of the music industry, is it's not unionized.
Mhm.
Can you imagine if it was unionized? We'd never get
Yeah.
anything set up on time. It'd never
Mm,
happen. It
mm.
would just never happen. I
The
mean, as
long
it is,
hours, yeah, would
yeah, I
be
mean, as it is, we're having to work around different IATSE and different unions like that. But
mm,
that's here in America. I mean, the rest of the world, you can do whatever you want, whenever you want,
mhm.
as far as hours and time and schedules and stuff, which is both a good and a bad thing. I mean, because people take advantage of that with scheduling and stuff, and you can go days without sleep. If you've got a rough enough schedule, you can go
Mhm,
days without sleep. And
mhm,
that's when it gets dangerous. So, there has to be some sort of monitoring of it, obviously.
mhm.
If it was unionized, I think it would just change the whole dynamic of the industry. It would
Yeah,
change the whole dynamic of the industry. Not
yeah,
saying that unions are a bad thing. I'm just saying that this
mhm.
industry, it's tough. It's tough, because you've got to be prepared to keep going until it's done, because what's that old adage? The show must go on.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know, that started in this, 1700s,
yeah.
when they were doing Shakespeare, for God's sake, the show must go on. And it's still the mantra today, the show must go on.
No
You
matter
know,
what. Yeah,
it is. So, and you've got to be generous. You've got to be generous with your time, and you've got to be generous with your knowledge, and
yeah.
you've got to be supportive. That's
Mhm,
the other thing, because
mhm.
it's such a stressful job, which
Yeah.
people outside of our industry don't realize. They think that
Mhm.
we're all out there having a big party every day and hanging out with the band, you know, which is just so far from the truth. It's ridiculous, you know. But you know, it's our industry has the highest suicide rate of any industry in the world.
Wow.
Yeah.
I
So
didn't realize that.
yeah, yeah, it's a serious problem. It's
Mm.
a serious problem.
And is that
And
due to, a r just do you think more recognition would help that, or more sort of, recognition of what the job entails, and, uh, appreciation, or
I
what is
think
that?
I
That
think more support and more understanding would help. I mean,
Yeah, the
the thing
pressure.
the
Yeah.
thing that happens is, I mean, a lot of the people who are involved, you know, who are statistics of the suicides are the older people
Mm,
because they've given their whole life to this industry. And
yeah,
then they've found out that they don't have medical coverage, they don't have health care, they don't have a retirement fund, they don't
yeah.
have anything. They don't have their wife anymore, they don't have their
Mm,
family. A lot of them have lost their families because
mm,
they've been on the road so much. And
mm,
all of a sudden, everything just stops. And the
mm.
silence is deafening and
Yeah,
they can't stand it.
yeah.
You know? So, I mean, I think, you know, what would be an amazing thing, which has started, Australia has a thing called Support Act and Crew
Mhm,
Care, which are two
mm,
organisations in Australia which are there 100% for
mm,
road crew that
mhm.
help them with like mental health issues, they help them with physical health issues, they help them with all sorts of things, and it's a support group, and that's something that's needed worldwide
Mhm.
because it's such a
Yeah,
tough industry. It's such a
yeah.
tough industry, you
You're
know.
sort of married to your job for
Yeah, yeah.
many years.
Yeah,
Yeah, and
and your
then
real family suffers for it, you know,
mm,
and a lot of marriages don't last. Mine didn't last,
mm,
you
mhm,
know, a lot of marriages don't last.
mm.
It's
It's
it's it's hard. It's tough on the families. It's tough on kids. It's tough on wives,
mhm,
husbands, I guess now as well. It's tough on, you
mm,
know. So
mhm,
it's you know it's a hard industry. So
mhm.
we need to take more care of each other.
Yeah, yeah, it sounds like a worldwide support network, or l a breakout of support networks everywhere.
Absolutely,
Very needed.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And again, going back to what I said earlier, is we're quite a proud bunch of people. We
Mm,
take pride in what we do, and we're proud that we do the job that we do. So we don't like to admit to weaknesses, you know.
mm,
And when people stop touring, they feel weak, they feel
mhm.
vulnerable, they don't have a job, they don't know any other job. They don't know that they can do any job that they put their mind to
Yeah.
because they've only been doing this job, you know. And
Mm,
I say to people, you know, look, can you drive a car? Yes, you can drive a car. Can you drive a forklift? You can drive a forklift. Can you
yeah,
push a case that weighs 100 pounds? You can push a case that weighs 100 pounds. You can lift something that weighs 50 to 100 pounds. You can do a ton of different things. But
yeah.
it's
They are
hard.
marketable
You're
skills.
working, you know, you're working for Bruce Springsteen for 10 years, then all of a sudden you're packing shelves at Ralph's, you know?
Mhm.
It's a hard fall. And
Yeah.
some people just can't handle it, you know,
Mm,
and it's sad. It's sad,
mm,
you know.
and
So there needs to be a cushion there. If there was some sort of cushion, you know, where people could at least stay in touch and do wellness checks on each other and have get-togethers occasionally. That's what they do down in Australia. You know, there's Roadie for Roadies is an organization that raises money, and they have like annual events and barbecues and different
mm,
things. And you know, Crew Care, you know,
mm,
works on a lot of the mental health side of it and the physical
mhm,
health side of it. And
mhm,
Support Act does all sorts of things, the whole gamut of things, you know.
mhm,
So I mean, for a pretty small country by population size, you know, and
mm,
crew size, you know, they've actually gone out and done a lot of stuff, and the government's actually getting involved as well, which is just a brilliant
good.
thing. You know, the
Yeah,
government gives money to these organizations because
yeah,
they see the value in it, you know.
yeah,
So it's something that's severely needed, and America, God knows, needs it as much as anybody, if not more so, because
yeah.
there's so many people here.
We have Crew Nation through Live Nation, but I don't know that there's as much mental health or networking as a part of that. And Music Cares is for everybody in the industry, musicians included. But yeah, again, I don't know how much of that is meant
You've
to
got
be
to
a
get
full
out.
network of support. Yeah,
You've got to get out there. You've got to have boots on the ground because people won't admit that they've
yeah,
got a problem. That's
yeah,
the hardest part, is getting the people to admit that they're having
that they
problems.
need help.
that they need help.
Yeah.
You know, you can have 100 organizations, but if they're not reaching the people, then what's the point? You
Yeah.
know, it's got to
Yeah.
be hands-on. It's got to be hands-on, and there's got to be motivation to get these people out
Yeah.
and mingling and interacting with people still and
Yeah.
living their lives still, because they just shut down completely.
Yeah. And how else do you find out and get to tell people what you need if you're not interacting, if you're just
Absolutely.
isolated? Yeah.
Absolutely. You know,
That has been a wonderful thing that SoundGirls has been doing. Every Wednesday, there's a Zoom that anybody can join on, and anybody can be a part of SoundGirls, men or women or non-gendered, and you can find support. It's a group of support, that for people who, just can appreciate what each other does without discriminating based on gender.
absolutely. I take my hat off to Sound Girls. I'll always do anything I can to help Sound Girls. It's a wonderful
Yeah.
organization.
Yeah. So you also formed a nonprofit, is that right?
I did, yes. I did, the music cooperative.
What
Yes,
what was
that was
that?
a while ago. But yeah, there was an artist development side to it where I would bring in bands and we'd develop them and we'd pitch them to record labels and things like that. And, you know, other bands would come on and get involved with like education. You know, we did a huge project with Venice High School here in Los Angeles where Black Eyed Peas performed at lunchtime. They did a lunchtime
Mm,
concert,
mm.
and then they went into the classes of the music classes and they sat with the students and did that. I got Yoko Ono has a bus, which is got the
Okay.
John Lennon Foundation.
Yeah.
And so that came and we recorded we had a competition leading up to the day, and 6 of the students got to record their own original music on the bus. So that was something. We bought the marching band all new equipment, you know, which was wonderful. So, you know, between Zildjian and all the different companies contributed, you know, giving equipment for the band equipment. And, Cameron's company, what are they called? Digital
Mm,
Domain, which
mhm.
is a special effects company. You know, they do everything from, you know, Titanic to, you know, all
Oh,
these.
Cameron Crowe. Mhm.
Yes,
Mhm.
yes,
Mhm.
Cameron Crowe, yeah.
Yeah.
So he donated like 30 computers to the music
Wow.
department so they could do stuff. So yeah, that was the sort of thing that we did. It was like the original getting music back into the schools program, and then
You were studying, yeah.
from that Save the Music came about, which was the VH1 project, Save the Music. So
Mm.
you know, it was like groundwork for that basically,
Wow.
which was
Okay.
good. Yeah, so that was an interesting thing, and that was my way of giving back. You know, it was like,
Mhm.
you know, Craig hadn't been into the whole music industry side of it, and you know, so you know, I couldn't do anything for him, so I thought, well, at least I can help other kids. You know, so
Yeah.
it was a way of doing something along those lines. So it was very
Mhm.
fulfilling, and you know,
Uh-huh.
while it was going, it was quite successful. You know,
Mhm.
again, you know, non-profits are very difficult to keep running. You know, they all
Yeah.
depend on donations the
Right.
whole time, and you know, you've got to have a huge support system and a huge foundation behind it. But it started something. It started the ball rolling, and that was a good thing.
Yeah. What years were that?
That was around the turn of the century.
Okay.
Let me say it that way, just to sound
Y2K.
about 98 through to 2002.
Okay.
So
Mhm.
4 years we did that for, yeah.
That's when the school defunding happened. Was it?
Yes, absolutely. And
Um,
that's what inspired it.
yeah.
Yes.
Trying to make sure that the kids were still being trained in the
Active with
arts.
music. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
It was a way of shaming the government.
It was really like, yeah, a great underappreciation of the necessity of arts training and all that it benefits human beings.
Yeah, you know, there's a
Yeah.
great quote from Winston Churchill, you
Mhm.
know, during World War II. They were saying the government approached Winston Churchill, who obviously was running the country of England at the time, and they said, we're going to have to cut the fundings to the arts. We don't have any money because of the war. World War II was going on.
Mhm.
And he just looked at them and he said, without the arts, what are we fighting for?
Mhm. Yeah.
Shame they don't have shame we don't have leaders like that anymore, isn't it?
Yeah. Well,
Sure.
I think, thankfully, I think that quote may have come up, in the last 4 years when the NEA, National Endowment for the Arts, was being threatened, and there was a lot of support to make sure it wasn't cut, and yeah, and consequently, I think it got some extra support because people rallied behind that quote. For one
Absolutely.
thing, yeah.
It
Mm.
was not 80 years ago.
Yeah, at this point.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Um, so in with the breadth of your career, have you seen that there's a difference in learning or training styles and successive generations from how you've had to learn, or is it still basically
Well, yes
certain?
and no. I mean, obviously, you've got Music Institute,
Yeah,
you've
these
got all
days.
these different colleges, and again, through SoundGirls, who we do the mentoring program.
Yeah, great
I
thing.
mentored a girl who's at the San Diego University doing a course.
Hmm.
And so, I mean, it's become legitimized as a career now. It's actually accepted as a career. Whereas when I started doing it, it was like, yeah, well, that's good, but when are you going to get a real job?
Hmm.
And that went on for decades. It was like, oh, that's great, but when are you going to get a real job? It's like, this is a real job, but now, I mean, now parents are actually paying for their children to go to school to learn how to do this job,
Yeah.
which is,
Some parents,
I
yeah.
think it's a bit of a double-edged sword, because I think a lot of the students come out of school thinking they can be a sound engineer straight away. They
Mhm.
think they can just walk into a tour and do front of house sound. They don't realize that they still have to come up through the ranks. They still need to get that foundation. You know, the educational foundation is wonderful. Yes, it's great. It really is. I mean, as long as it's a decent school. I mean, there's some dodgy ones out there,
Mhm.
but if you're fortunate enough to get a decent school and decent tutors, that's great, but that's not going to carry you in a career. You still have to get the hands-on experience, and you
Mhm.
still have to be guided by people who have been doing this for decades and decades and decades, because they're the people who have been through the evolution of the industry. So
Mhm.
they know how to do it hard, they know how to do it easy, they know how to do it quick, and they know how long it's going to take to do it. So they know all of these ins and outs that it takes to put on a production. It's nothing's set in ink, and that's
Mhm.
my only hesitance with all these colleges, etc. Is I think it may be a little too black and white what they're being taught, because
Mhm.
there's a lot of grey areas in our industry. But as long as they come out of school wide-eyed and ready to learn more,
Mhm.
they've done their 4 years there. Well, they're going to have another 4 years here before they can do what they need to do, probably. I mean, it's not a
Mhm.
set 4 years, but you know what I'm saying. I'm
Yeah,
saying
you're ramping up.
they've got
Yeah.
to graduate. They've got to graduate now
Mhm.
from real world situation. They've
Yeah.
graduated from the college. That's great, but now
Mhm.
they've still got more learning to do, and they
Mhm.
need to be prepared to do that. So again, as long as they're prepared to take direction and
Mhm.
look and learn and work hard, because it's hard work. They're not going to just rock up wearing white gloves and start operating a soundboard, or rock
Yeah.
up wearing white gloves and start operating a lighting console. No, there's very few of those jobs, and people who have those jobs have worked long and hard to get those jobs. So as
Yeah.
long as they're realistic with their expectations and prepared to do the hard work, we could have the next generation of great people.
Mhm.
But they've got to understand that the learning didn't stop with the 4 years at whatever college they were in. As
Yeah.
long as
Yeah.
they know that, then they're off to a good start. They've got an advantage because they've been taught some of the theory that we were never taught. You
Mm.
know, we
Mhm.
were never taught anything. We were just taught,
You figured it out.
take this and make it work.
Mhm. But
So
you can teach the practicalities beyond
absolutely,
theory.
absolutely,
Yeah.
we can teach how it should be done and
Yeah.
how it needs to be done,
Yeah.
and they've learned how it's supposed to be done, which is
It's
rarely
just
the case.
yeah, yeah. That's a good difference there.
It
Yeah.
is a good difference. It's a big difference. So as long as they're aware
Mhm.
of that, I'm sure they'll have a great future.
Yeah, it's being
It's
open-minded.
unfortunate. It's unfortunate for the class of 2000. you know, that have graduated and don't have an industry to go into.
Mm.
That's unfortunate. And we're also losing a lot of people because of the amount of time. I mean, I don't see this opening up until probably 2022. I don't think it's going to happen before then, you know, to be honest. And
Sure. Yeah.
I've been saying that since day one. You know, people are going, oh, it'll be a few months, it'll be a few months, it'll be a few months. You'll drive yourself insane if you think like that.
Yeah.
You know, you've got to be prepared. You've got to tighten your belt. You've got to put yourself on a budget,
And
because the government
visit.
can't afford to keep giving money away. They
Yeah.
just can't. They don't have the money to give away. So that whole thing's going to come as well. That hasn't even started, the ripple effect of all this money that's been given to different organizations, and the small amounts of money that's been given to individuals, you know.
Yeah.
That money's all got to get paid back, you know, and we're the ones who are going to have to pay it back. So it's going to be a rough few years coming up. So I feel sorry for the kids who graduated in 2020, you know, or the ones that are going to be graduating in 2021 even, you know. It's going to be tough for them, because we're not going to go back to full 100% operating capacity for a very long time.
Yeah.
So it's going to be hard for new people who don't have the experience to get the work.
Yeah.
It's going to be tough.
Fewer opportunities.
But it's going to be tough for people who have been doing it for decades as well, because there's not going to be enough work to go around when it does start coming back, you know. So, you know.
Yeah, I've known people who are seasoned pros that they kind of had it in their prospects to pivot, and for the time being, they've completely pivoted. You know,
Absolutely.
they are not going to walk into a venue right now and expose themselves and or go on tour, and you know, they're just putting their all into an alternative business at the moment.
And you have to. That's what you have to do. We're all adults, and we have to find a way to support ourselves, you know, because there's going to be just terrible repercussions from this. There's going to be like terrible fallout from this. And it's all going to be financial, and it's all going to be health. I mean, the health system itself is just going to be stretched for decades to come after this. Because anyone who's had this virus, anyone who's had a bad case of this virus is never going to 100% recover from it. It affects your lungs, it affects your heart, it affects everything. So anyone who says, oh, you know, who cares? They've got a vaccine coming out is an idiot.
Yeah, exactly. You know? It just, you don't want to get it. Yeah, it just is not a good idea. Yeah.
No,
I have a chronic condition myself, and some of the long-term effects sort of mirror what I have. And I'm like, you don't want this. Are you crazy? You know, you don't want your kid to get this. Like, do not get it, you know.
Absolutely.
Yeah, hopefully people stay healthy and safe as much as possible, and do. I know it's hard to keep diligent with the sinus rinsing and the this and the that, but it's important, and also sifting through conflicting information. Yeah, we just all have to take a deep breath and try to stay up with it and keep each other informed, and try to find the best sources of information, and use our head, you know, about what we do and what's safe and what's not safe, and keeping our loved ones safe, and
I mean, we've just got
come out of it, you know.
we've got to be selective for the future. We've got to think of the future, not right now. We can't live in the moment right now. We have to think of the future and how we're going to get there. That's what we have to think of, is how are we going to get there, and how are we going to get there in a state that we can actually continue to do the jobs that we love to do, and put on the performances that we love to work for, and keep an industry alive, you know, because they're dead in the water right now, you know. I mean, they're starting to do shows back in Australia right now.
Yes, they are. Yeah. Because they're at zero, or maybe a couple digits, but not community spread. Yeah.
Well, and that's because they shut down their borders, which is what America needs to do. And they're just
contact trace. Yeah.
They shut the borders. There was no traveling. There was none of that. And people were actually, I mean, but people were forced to stay within their housing. If there was a housing complex that had an outbreak, they were all forced to stay in. They complained and they complained, but then they realized, you know what, we're going to have to do this. So they just sucked it up and did it, which unfortunately is not happening in this country. And that's why it's not going to get better.
Yeah, and people coming in also have to quarantine for 14 days.
Oh
There's
yeah.
absolutely no sort of thing like that here.
And
Just
they charge you $3,000 for the 2 weeks quarantine.
oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow,
They
so
take,
that's
they
another
take from
deterrent.
the airport to the hotel room and they have guards in the hallways
Wow, that's
in that room.
unfortunate.
Oh yeah. And it costs you $3,000 for the privilege.
Wow. That's taking it seriously, though.
Absolutely,
That's
absolutely. And the proof's
powerful
in the
people.
pudding because they've actually, got an advantage on it. So,
Yeah, I
you know,
follow the Sydney Morning Herald on Facebook, and
oh, okay.
every day there's from one of the ministers, there's an update. I'm just like I listen to the numbers and I'm just like,
I
wow.
know, it's amazing, isn't it?
Meanwhile, yeah, yeah. I mean, if we could be collectively have that collective clarity
Yes.
like that, I mean, gosh,
Good
yeah,
sacrifice. You have to be prepared to make a sacrifice for the greater good, and
mm,
unfortunately that's just not happening here.
yeah,
So,
yeah. People are
which is
too
sad.
restless.
It's very
Yeah.
sad.
Well, you also, I don't know if how much you can or you want to talk about it, but you're in development of something that will also kind of address the current show situation. Is that right? Is that something?
Virtual. Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you want to talk about that a little bit, or can you,
Sure.
or not quite
No,
yet?
no, I can sort of vaguely, yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's a technology that we've created
Mhm,
that actually gloms a lot of different technologies together. So
mhm,
it's using parts from the film industry, parts from the music industry, and parts from virtual and ultra reality. And so it's a way where we can actually put on a major concert, full production, and have a virtual audience, but completely different. It's not streaming. Everybody's streaming. It's not streaming. It's
mhm,
like a pay-per-view event. So
mhm.
you would pay to see it, and it's actually with virtual headsets. So you
Okay.
actually put your virtual headset on to
Mhm,
attend the event, and you're actually in the venue,
mhm,
with the band on the stage. So, and when you look around, there's other audience members in the venue, not avatars, actual people,
mhm, mhm.
audience in there. So, but they're there virtually as well. So you get the whole feeling, the whole immersion of a live concert.
I've seen a couple artists begin to do that. Yeah,
Yes,
just
it's
beginning.
people are touching on it. They haven't put all the elements that we've put together.
Okay.
But obviously, it's not a cheap technology.
Yeah, and everybody has to have a headset. Yeah.
Yeah, well, everyone has to have a headset, but also from the production side, it's not cheap.
Mhm,
We still have to do all these different technologies and we have to mesh them together, and it has to be seamless. So, and then it has to be screened as, a live event.
yeah.
So there's a lot of technology involved, and there's a lot of different elements that have to be brought together to do it. So, we're almost at a point, hopefully, early next year we'll be at a point where it can actually come into realization, which would be nice because we've been working on it since February.
Mm,
Um, the minute this whole thing started, it was like, you know what? There needs to be a way we can keep this industry above order. We need to
yeah.
keep it going. And again, not only will it keep production people working, but what it will do is it will enable them again to pivot also to the other technologies that we're using. So it'll be training people, it'll be teaching people, so it'll be a learning curve as well, but it will also be a training curve so
Mhm,
people can learn a new technology, because
mhm.
when it comes off the ground, it will be a new technology that
Yeah.
has not been done before. So,
That
you know,
sounds amazing.
it's exciting. It's exciting, and whether it's first use, hopefully it's first use in the music industry. I've had a couple of offers from different organizations that want to use it. So
Mhm.
I mean, I would love it to be used the first time in the music industry, but we'll see how it goes. Obviously we've got to
Mhm.
go where the money is.
Yeah. Yeah. And you
So we'll
seem
see.
like you have a unique breadth of experience to address so many of the areas in terms of
Well, it's,
light, sound, the
yeah.
logistics of what kind of equipment and
Absolutely, absolutely. And again, it's curiosity. It's like, how
yeah.
can we make this happen? How can we save this industry that's dormant at the moment?
Mhm.
And this
Uh,
to me would be a wonderful way to do it. Would get people working, would get music back out there, would get the audiences happy. it's a
Yeah.
win-win for everybody, you know, so we'll see how it goes.
Yeah.
Fingers crossed, we'll
Yeah.
see how it
Uh-huh.
goes.
Yeah. It sounds exciting.
Absolutely.
Also exciting is I understand you've finished writing a book. Is that right? And you'll be
I have, yes, and
that.
it's actually being released in February the
Okay.
3rd.
That's
It's
coming
the
up.
release
Yeah.
date. It's,
Uh-huh.
the book is called Loud,
Okay.
L-O-U-D, Loud. Pretty apt name, I think. And it's published through HarperCollins. So at the moment, it's being released on the 3rd is the release date. You can get the e-version in the UK, the United States and Canada. And in Australia and New Zealand, it's being launched there, both e-version and paper version. And then eventually it'll come out over here also. But we don't, you know, they do it like they do with music. They release it to different regions. You know, different regions have to buy it to get it,
Okay.
to actually print it, you know, but the
Uh-huh.
e-version is obviously worldwide. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, so that comes out on the 3rd. So, and that pretty much covers, you know, my life in the industry and different bands that I worked for over the years and different people that I came across. And it's a nod to, you know, production people across the world, different ones who I've worked with. And it's, you know, it's a, you know, it's a story of the evolution of the industry. So if you're
Mm-hmm.
in the industry, it's something that's worth reading.
Mm-hmm.
You'll get
Mm-hmm.
a laugh, you'll get all sorts of information out of it, and a few little stories along the way.
Sounds wonderful. I can't
Yeah,
wait to read it.
yeah.
Yeah.
Hopefully it's
Yeah.
entertaining for everybody. Yes. You
Mm-hmm.
know, it's hard to write a book, you know, you spend a
Yeah.
lot of time and, you know, it's the first book written by someone on the production side of the industry that's ever been picked up by a major publishing company.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah,
obviously I've
for
got faith in it.
popular
So
reading. Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
because HarperCollins is one of the big three, they call it the big three in the world.
Yeah.
So I was excited about that.
Mm-hmm.
That was a nod saying that they've got faith in the story and they want to see it run.
Yeah.
So again, fingers crossed. Here we go.
Yeah, that's great. Maybe you'll be having some virtual tours of that as
Absolutely.
well,
Yeah.
right?
Yes. Yeah, it all starts in January.
Okay.
So yeah, because they close down, like the music industry, they close down from the middle of December through the middle of January. Actually, I've done 2 interviews already that'll go to print, that'll come out in February.
Oh,
But
I
there's tons of television and
mhm.
virtual events and radio and stuff. So and a lot of some of the stuff that's done in Australia is also broadcast over here. So you know there'll be a little bit of a crossover, and then you know hopefully when it's released here, then we'll start all over again.
So everybody should follow you on your socials, right? So that they
Well,
can
everyone should, yeah. I mean, I've got a website that tells you a little bit about the book, which is tanadouglas.com.
yeah.
And I'm
You've got
on,
wonderful writing there too. I should
oh, thank you. Thank
yeah.
you.
Mm-hmm.
And we're on Facebook. And I promise I'll get better with Instagram.
It's so much these days.
I know
Yeah.
it is. I need to steal a college student.
So your handle is Tana Douglas all through everything?
It's Tana Douglas Official on Instagram, and it's Tana Douglas on Facebook, and
Okay.
tanadouglas.com on the website.
Do you have a Twitter as well?
No, I haven't tweeted yet. I went off tweeting with that president you guys have.
Ah, yes.
Now
Yes.
he's cleared the airwaves, I may do that as well, but we'll see. It's all a work in progress. I know I have to get better at this, so I'll practice over the holiday break.
There is a way to, there's different ways to tie them all together. We
Oh,
can talk
good.
about that
We'll
offline a
talk
bit.
afterwards.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, I want to
I'll
thank you for
accept any and all help.
yeah. We'll talk.
Not too proud to ask.
Mhm, mhm. It's important to share info, and we're all figuring it out, honestly.
Absolutely, absolutely.
It's constantly a new thing every week. Like, what are the kids using now?
I know, I know. Oh,
Yeah.
and the book also has a playlist that goes with it. So
Oh,
that's on Spotify under Tana Oz.
Tana. Okay, TANAOZ.
Yeah.
Okay, that's up right now.
That's
All
up right now. Yes,
right.
32.
Okay, I'm gonna follow you on Spotify. Yeah, that's
Oh,
great.
see?
Great. Everybody follow Tana on all socials. Don't
Yes,
miss a
please.
thing.
Yes, please.
Yeah,
We'll start putting more and more stuff up
yeah.
for the new year. We'll get in full flight for January, but we've got stuff up there now. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, and I've been doing quite a bit of stuff. I've done some stuff with SoundGirls, which has been wonderful. I always love working with you guys. That's great. And the Arts Centre down in Australia, we did a project called Banding Together, which was,
Right.
they chose 12 people in the country, and I was one of the 12 people they chose from the music industry. And we all spoke about, how COVID's affecting the industry and how it's changed and all that sort of stuff. So all of those things, there's tons of stuff on YouTube as well. You can just Google Tana Douglas and there's stuff all over the place. So yeah, so we're getting there.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for taking the time with Sound Girls and with me to share all of the experiences you were able to. And I have hopefully not completely exhausted you with all my questions.
No, absolutely. No,
Um,
it's been a sheer pleasure. And anytime, I'm always more than happy to do anything for Sound Girls because you guys are wonderful.
is there anything else we didn't touch on, or do you feel that like anything you want to mention that people don't usually ask that,
I think we've pretty much covered it.
yeah, yeah,
I think you've done a pretty thorough job,
under any rock.
Yes, absolutely. And I just want to wish everyone the best out there, as far as, the climate goes right now with the industry, it's not good, but you know what, it's going to get better, guys. So hang in there and take this time to learn. Take this time to learn. There's so many companies out there which have classes online that they're not charging for. Normally they charge for them. They're free now because they understand that people, need to save their money and, have things that they need to really, cover their bills and stuff. So take advantage of these classes, because once this goes away, they'll go back to charging for their classes because they have to make money as well. So, learn anything, no matter what field you're in. If you're in sound, learn sound stuff, or learn some backline stuff, or learn some special effects stuff, even lighting, or electricity. Learn something that you don't know already. So, out of the last plague came the Renaissance. So let's have something good come out of this one, you know?
Very true.
The
Yeah.
best thing I can suggest for anybody is just keep learning, take the time, turn it into a positive.
Yeah,
And if you're depressed, reach out, talk to people.
definitely.
Yeah.
Have a network and have some friends, and
Absolutely. And like you say, Wednesdays with Sound Girls, jump on,
yeah.
jump on, have a chat.
A completely, open, supportive forum, and I've been pretty busy, but I haven't logged on in a while because I help out a blog on the side. But it's a wonderful, from the experience I had on it and from what I'm still hearing about it. And sometimes they go on for hours, just sort of,
Yeah.
you know, supporting each other and helping each other literally find their way. The one girl was lost somewhere and they got on with maps and helped navigate her somewhere. And so it
Fabulous.
was,
You should
you
send me
never know. It's good to stay tuned in. You never know how people can help. And
absolutely,
it's like,
absolutely. You should send me the link and I'll jump on.
yeah, I'm sure they would love to have you, Tana.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, it'd be my pleasure.
Well, thank you so much, and we'll
Pleasure.
speak
My pleasure.
again
Like I
very
say, any
soon.
time for you guys. And it's been a great experience. And when does this go up?
I'm not sure. This is being recorded, and I don't know if they have to do anything else to it after. Um, and I usually it doesn't take too long for when they're doing a workshop. So I don't know for the living history what kind of a timeline they have for releasing things.
So
But I can ask.
people just go onto soundgirls.org and they can look up living history.
You can see if they have anything up as of now for that. Yeah,
Because there's more interviews involved in this. I mean, it's not just me. We're doing this
yeah,
with different people, right?
it's a whole series. Yeah,
Yeah.
so I can't
That's what I
remember.
wanted to get that out there, that it's a whole
Yeah,
series and there's a lot of different people involved. Yeah.
yeah, and there's so many profiles they've done. So it's quite a wonderful,
Project.
line of, yeah, yeah. And so just in terms of the Living History Project, but also the profiles, the regular profiles. So
Yeah.
I will ask Carrie though when she thinks this will go up, and then yeah, we can get to watch and look back and, oh, I said too many ums. I said too many. Oh well, it's done.
That's what editing's for.
Yeah, yeah. I think we did okay though. I think we did great.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, you did wonderfully, Tana.
All
Thank you
right.
so
Well,
so
I
much.
want to thank you for having me.
Yeah.
Enjoy the holiday season.
Yes, you too.
And
Stay warm and
all you sound girls out there, be safe.
yeah, for sure. Everybody be
Okay.
safe, stay healthy, reach out if you need help. Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay.
Okay.
All
I'm
right.
gonna
Thank you
off
so
the
much,
hook now.
Juliet.
Okay, we'll be in touch, Tana.
Brilliant. All right, love. Thank you.
Okay. Bye bye.
Bye.